I don't blame him. In the days gone by, when I'd speak anywhere, I would say, my name is Lionel Metrick. I'm a dentist. I work evenings, and I'm reasonable. My office is a stone's throw from the National War Memorial. That is, if you have an arm like Sandy Koufax. Sandy Koufax was the great Jewish pitcher for Los Angeles Dodgers, who refused to pitch on Yom Kippur. In that regard, I say, how can you pitch on an empty stomach? Because we're in shul tonight, I say, Shema Yisrael, hear ye, O Israel, while Shmuel Metrick sounds off. I must admit that I'm flattered over your choosing to spend 60 minutes with me instead of 60 minutes with CBS. I think that's funny. President Lawrence, who invited me to speak, insisted that I talk about my relatives. Now, Sarah Metrick, my wife, to whom I was very happily married for over 40 years, always cautioned me, Lionel, if you can't be loyal, at least be silent. So we shall now observe 2 minutes of silence. Thank you. Does everyone have a copy of that skeletal genealogy chart? Does everybody have a copy? No? Okay. Would you, Elaine, would you like to give the lady a copy?
I certainly will.
Pardon?
I certainly will.
Okay. Now, does everybody have a copy?
Yes.
Okay. Because I'm very proud of it. It took me about 3 months to put it together. I like to think, you see Beryl Dov Pullan, the father of them all, I like to think that he inherited a fortune in vodka distilleries and gold mines. But somebody talked him into investing in derivatives, and so he lost it all and reduced us to impoverished proletarians who yearned for better days in America, away from the Russian domination and cruelty. Now, please follow me as I read from the back of the genealogy chart about Dov Pullan's son, Elia. Elia Plotnik led the way for the Pullans out of Lithuania to America. He was tall, strong, handsome, and wise. In 1885, at age 15, he journeyed to Manchester, England, where he worked for a Jewish glass company named Pullan. He took the name with him to Toronto in 1886, where he worked on the railroad. The following year, he became a peddler of small wares. Next year, 1888, he became a junk dealer, buying and selling scrap metal, waste paper, and rags. He graduated into waste paper mainly, that is, buying, sorting, and baling it for sale to the paper mills. The paper mills' demand for baled waste paper was, and is, insatiable. This waste paper is a major ingredient, along with rags and wood chips, in the manufacture of paper. Envisioning the purchase of waste paper from the different departments of the federal government and selling it to the E.B. Eddy paper mill in Hull prompted Elia to move his family and business to Ottawa in 1899. In that same year, he orchestrated the movement of his sisters and brothers and their families to Ottawa. He formed a partnership with his brother-in-law, Abe Florence, who was married to his sister Lena. Because of her premature death, a Hadassah chapter was named for her. Partnerships are always a hassle. So in 1905, Elia returned to Toronto and resumed business there. In 1938, he celebrated his 50th anniversary in the waste paper business, which became the largest in Ontario. He gave generously of both time and money to Toronto Talmud Torah, synagogue, free loan, and old folks. As a result, he became prominent in the Jewish community in Toronto in the early 1900s. He lived to age 96. In the meantime, Elia's influence on the relatives in Ottawa was deep and lasting. Abe Florence prospered. He donated generously to the Rita Street Shul, which he bankrolled solo for some time. A.L. Florence, A.J. Freeman, J. Friedman, and A.H. Coplan were the major contributors in the purchase of the Talmud Torah building on George Street. A.L. built a mansion on Lady Grey Drive overlooking the Ottawa River. Elia's nephew, Archie Coplan, by marriage to Lena Pullan, started in secondary materials and wound up manufacturing iron and steel castings such as wheels and couplings for railway cars. In World War I, he made casings for shells. In World War II, he made tread tracks for tanks. In his day, he was the only Jewish manufacturer of steel in Canada. Elia's nephews, Max and Tom Sachs, also prospered in waste paper, scrap metal, and rags. Another nephew, Alec Betjeman, by marriage to Molly Florence, went from scrap metal into aluminum ingots. Like Elia, all his Ottawa nephews contributed much time and money to local Jewish projects. Whenever Elia Pullan came to Ottawa, he would visit us and bring Annie, my mother, a big box of Laura Secord chocolates. I remember his telling me how proud he felt, being a Jew, when he attended a service in the big, beautiful temple, Emmanuel, in New York City at 65th and 5th Avenue. For my bar mitzvah, Elia sent me a Rolex watch, a Rolex wristwatch. The accompanying note read, "May you always have a good time." I'm pleased to advise you that Elia's oldest son, Harry, that's in column 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Harry, you see, Elia married Bertha. They had 10 kids. Martha, and then Harry married Rose Smith. Whose sister Ann Smith married Michael Friedman, President Lawrence's father. Now you know why Lawrence ordered me to talk about the Pullans. By way of ostentation, Ruth Pullan's husband, Dr. Volpe, you see Ruth, you see under Harry, you see Ruth, Dr. Volpe. Everybody see that? Okay, that's in column 5. Are you with me? Okay. Now, by way of ostentation, Ruth Pullan's husband, Dr. Volpe, is a professor of medicine at the University of Toronto Medical School and is a world authority in endocrinology. I must say that David, you'll see the name under Ruth, David Pullan. He and Dorothy gave me a hand on some of the information I have here. Now in column 1, the next relative I shall roast is Elia's sister, my mother's Auntie Toba, Sachs. She and her husband, Shmuley, after whom I'm named, operated a convenience store. He died prematurely in his 20s, leaving her to the store herself. On one occasion, she bought a carload of prunes on the turn, canned them in jars, and sold them off. Around 1911, she put Max and Tom in the same business as her brother Elia. They were listed in the directory, in the city directory, as Max and Tom Sachs, dealers in junk, paper, stock, second-hand machinery at 160 and 166 Queen Street West. They resided at 17 Lett Street, and in 1914 moved to 652 Wellington Street. The boys worked hard and prospered. Toba visited my mother every day because she lived on Wilbrod Street and we lived on Stewart Street. She wore a shaitel and insisted on speaking in Yiddish to my mother so that I would learn the language. Let me quote from the World Book about Yiddish. During the late 1800s, when thousands of European Jews settled on other continents, Yiddish came into contact with several more languages, especially English. Yiddish borrowed from English and also contributed many expressions to it. A good example of this borrowing bit is the epitaph on the tombstone over the grave of a Jewish homosexual that read, "Gay in Dread." Toba's daughter, Riva, worked as a bookkeeper with the boys. She married Sam Brownstein from Toronto. They had 2 daughters. Amelia married Norman Loeb. So I'm related to the rich Loebs. Amelia started the Ottawa section of the National Council of Jewish Women of Canada. She was also very active in fundraising for this synagogue. Lenora, Amelia's sister, married Gordon Allen. They introduced the Weight Watchers system into Ottawa, and along with their son Sandy, have made it a very popular and successful system. Tom Sachs lived to 104, exactly as did his grandfather. On his 95th birthday in Toronto, by way of greetings, I said, if the good die young, then Tom Sachs is a bad man. But he's not all bad. His teeth are good. I know. I fixed them. Tom used to get a bang out of mimicking the way some Litvaken would say, "Mir essen Fisch auf Shabbos." Because I was able to say, "Wir essen Fisch auf Shabbos," I regarded myself as a Litvak who's had speech therapy. Max married Jenny and Yushevsky from Toronto, and they begat these 4 children. Lion, a professional engineer, also named after Shmuleb, his grandfather. I don't talk to Lion. We are zuschlagen. You see, he has a lot more money than I have, and I have a right to be jealous, according to the Human Rights Commission. He built a luxury hotel in Palm Beach, Florida, whereas I couldn't build a birdhouse there. This family feud may be resolved in time. When the Messiah comes, there will be equal distribution of wealth. And then we'll talk. Now, his brother Harold, the thoracic surgeon in the Civic Hospital, he won't talk to me. Because I once asked him if he was a dentist or just a doctor. I have a good relationship with their sisters, Bluma and Queenie, who live in Toronto. Queenie is married to an ophthalmologist. I recently met an eye specialist, Professor Lubert Streyer, who told me he has spent over 25 years in eye research at Stanford Medical School. All I could say in reply was, "Ay, ay, ay." Don't you think that's funny? Now we come to Lena Pullan. Now, Lena Pullan, that's in column 2. Lena Pullan That's my mother's aunt, her father's sister. I didn't know her at all. My father told me that she was a very beautiful woman. She died prematurely. Abe Florence, her husband, built her a mansion on Lady Grey Drive. Above the mansion, I remember a huge room with hardwood floors in the basement that could easily serve as a dance hall or a banquet room. One of the white plaster walls there had a big yellow stain. Frank and Harry were playing hockey with a grapefruit, and one of the boys scored. Alec Betjeman married Molly Florence. They had a son, Philip, and two daughters, Joy and Lena. Philip taught school in Thunder Bay for many years, and he is now retired. He loves the outdoors and spends time prospecting for different minerals. He sent me a letter he received years ago from Manny Pullan that has helped me in this project. Joy married a cousin, Ralph Singer, a dentist. I was at the beautiful wedding in the Chateau Laurier. It ended in divorce. Who can stand a dentist? They had one daughter, Bonnie. Joy is now happily married to a chap called Max that Frances Adelman introduced her to. Joy was a smart-looking gal. Lena Betjeman married an American cattleman. They had 4 children. The marriage did not last. She was a patient of mine, and I found her to be a very dear person. Now let's read about Jack Florence. Jack Florence was a colorful cousin, big and tough. He played professional lacrosse and football. He managed the Florence Paper Company along with his sisters and brothers from 1936, when his father died, until 1950. He promoted would-be singers with limited success. He supported Gordon Cameron, a gold driller in Malartic, Quebec, with considerable success. On the last drilling, they struck gold ore. They called the mine Camflo, Cam for Cameron and Flo for Florence. It produced gold for 25 years. Around 1950, Jack bought the property in the corner of Rito and Nelson Streets, where he established the La Paloma restaurant. Although he died a bachelor, he was never short of love. I used to fix one of his lady friends' teeth. She was an admirable choice, young and beautiful. I called her cousin. Now I come to the pride and joy of the Florence family. A.L. Avram Smith, named after his grandfather, A.L. Florence. Esther Florence married Julie Smith, Coleman's brother, and A.L. is the issue. He inherited the family businesses, ran them for a while, and sold them at the right time. When his daughter, Leanne, had difficulty getting a room in Kingston, when she enrolled at Queen's University, he bought her a home there. She was the only student on campus who owned her own home. So I ask you, who was the most popular kid on campus? Even the profs lined up for dates. Don't you think that's funny? A.L. is very happily married to his lovely wife, Anne, who is a BSc in nursing, a very dear person. At least once a week, A.L. would look in on Tom Sachs and take him to the doctor or whatever. That's what I call a worthy guy. Are you here? No, he's not here. Okay. Now let's go to column 3. I never saw or knew Devorah Pullan, who married Abe Coplan. I only know they had a second-hand goods store at 214 Bank Street in 1900. They also had one daughter, Bessie. and 2 sons, Manny and Louis. They also observed all the rules and regulations required of a Jewish home located behind the store. Thus they were able to receive Orthodox Rabbi Mordechai Mazer, who came to Ottawa from the United States in answer to an ad from one of the local synagogues. For Bessie and Mordechai, it was in those days love at first sight, as opposed to today's lust at first sight. They married, and Coplans put Mordechai in the business because wages for a rabbi were meager in those days. They were all very pleased with Mordechai's shochet ability. He'd kill the chickens. Bess was an avid reader of True Love magazines, and the result was 9 boys and 1 girl. The Mazer boys were all handsome, friendly, and clever. An example of their cleverness was evident in their refusal first to enter the secondary materials business, a dirty business, and secondly, they refused to enter the store business that requires the constant attention of 14 hours a day and no holidays. They chose to become civil servants. Hy Mazer rose from office boy to mandarin. He became the secretary of the War Veterans Allowance Board. The order was given in his secretariat that no staff member may leave the office at night without filling his waste paper basket. The reason was never given, but we know that Hy was secretly helping the Florences make a living from waste paper. Blood is thicker than water. In 1943, I arrived at OSAC, Officers Selection and Appraisal Center in Three Rivers. And lo and behold, whom do I see but Sammy Mazer? It was like seeing my mother. What's it like here, Sammy? Lionel, darling, there's an obstacle course here. He said the first day I was afraid I was going to die. And the next day, I was afraid I wasn't going to die. Incidentally, 5 of the Mazer boys, Harry, Davy, Sammy, Norman, and Ralph, are gone. Incidentally, when I was at the Palm Spring Follies last winter, there were in the audience a lot of old guys of my vintage. The MC said, the 2 words I will not mention here tonight are gone and prostate. Norman Mazer was in the dental corps. He was very good with his hands. He would have made a great dentist. I used to borrow his dental lab notes. He married Dodie Dworkin, whose mother was Ethel Goldman of the Goldmans. Harry, Mealy, Opchick, our neighbors on York Street. I have a vivid recollection of Opchick hypnotizing Toby Apple at the back of King Street Shul one Yontif to the delight of his youthful congregation. Opchick was also a talented pianist. Anyway, Norm and Dodie have a son, a physician, and a daughter, a pharmacist, both in Toronto. Gordon Mazer, who married Sally, has 2 daughters here in Ottawa. Karen Mazer is in statistics, and Pam Mazer is in speech therapy. Alan Mazer, now retired in Kingston from the civil servants, and his wife Jane have a son, Peter, who is a celebrated journalist with Southern Papers. Earl Mazer, my son, has a fancy job too, in the civil service here. Dorothy Mazur is married to Bill Siegel, an Ottawa boy. They live in California. Going back to Louis Coplan, Bessie Mazur's brother, married Alice, and they have one daughter, a physician, Dr. Doreen. She married a physician, Dr. Jack Teichman, a brother of Norman Teichman, Queenie Sachs' husband. Unfortunately, Jack died recently. Now let's go to column 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we come to Hersha. That's my grandfather. Hersha Pullan. I didn't know him, nor his wife Frida Moiselle. I just know from a copy of the 1901 census returns, they lived at 477 Wellington Street, and he was a fruit vendor. Their place of birth was given as Russia. I guess Russia occupied Lithuania. And year of immigration, 1900. They must have arrived here before April 1900, when all Hull burned down, and half of Ottawa too. Because my mother said her birth certificate was burned in the fire, and she didn't know how old she was. So I accused her of starting the fire. On a business trip to New York in 1912, in a kosher restaurant in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, Archie Coplan, Lena's husband, accidentally saw my father, Nathan, who was a younger landsman from Minsk. Archie's father was the leading Jewish baker in Minsk. By the way, Lil Gertzman's daughter, Cynthia, the psychiatrist, is an excellent baker. It's genetic. Anyway, my father told Archie he was still single and had a poor-paying job. Archie suggested that he come north and meet his sister-in-law, Annie, who was also single, and perhaps her father, Hersha, would provide enough nadan for a second-hand store. It all happened. My parents were married in 1913. My father opened a second-hand store on the corner of William and George, and Teddy was born April 1914. My father also got a part-time job as an interpreter. For Russian, an interpreter for Russian, Polish, Ukrainian, and Yiddish in the local courts. Phil Horwich told me that my father was the only man in town who could deliver an election speech in both English and Yiddish in the 1920s. My father opened a store on Main Street in Hull to sell new goods. When business was bad, he made Avdola, and he had a fire sale. You see, I don't think that's funny. His business went into receivership in the Great Depression of 1935 to 39. In 39, he joined the Postal Department censorship section. So we began to eat. In 1935, I got a job for $12 a week, no holidays, as manager of the Empire Shuri Builders, 139 Spark Street, and continued my Pass Arts course at St. Pat's at night. I worked there about 3.5 years, so when I graduated in dentistry, I became a specialist in the foot and mouth disease. We sold half soles for 60 cents a pair. Rubber heels, 25 cents a pair. Eggs sold for only 10 cents a dozen. When a Jewish hen boasted about the large eggs she was laying, her neighbor exclaimed, "Es Leinsack zu quetschen for 10 cents a Dutzend?" Anyway, I gave my mother the whole $12, and we got a boarder, Gordy Lauderman, a fruit broker from Montreal, and we kept the home fires burning. I think David helped out too. The radio was great, with Eddie Cantor, Jack Benny, Fred Allen, Al Jolson, and many others. My mother used to send Teddy $5 every 2 weeks while he was attending Osgood Hall Law School. My father used to regale us with stories about the great legal conquests he would hear in court of George F. Henderson, who had a doctorate in jurisprudence, and even the judges would quake in his presence. This perhaps may have influenced Ted into studying law. My father spent his last days at Hillel Lodge. When I took him to lunch, he would order a double Scotch, straight. He was a chain smoker of cigarettes, and he loved to gamble, things I never did. He was a real man. In this connection, at a family gathering at my Aunt Hilda's house in Toronto, Aunt Hilda said, "All men are unfaithful." And I said, "Gee, Aunt Hilda, I've never been unfaithful." And she replied, "You're a man." Metrick without the C is the Russian word for a birth certificate. When the Tsar Alexander II gave the order to assume a surname, my forebears, who kept records of the births of the people in Krupka, near Minsk, took the name birth certificate. And I like to think that they also contributed the words and music to the song, "Happy Birthday to You." My mother, Annie, was charismatic. To know her was to love her. She also possessed digital dexterity. Her kichel were the best in town. She embroidered bedspreads. She knitted sweaters and trouser shorts. We all the boys, we all had long curls until we went to school. Now, my brother David, after accounting around here, David went to Montreal, married Vera Sachs, and became a demolisher, first with his hands and then with dynamite. He wound up as president of the Big Emmanuel Temple, the Reform Shul in Montreal. As a member of a conservative shul, I, in public, distanced myself from him. They have one son, Alan, an astute businessman. Freddie, my brother Freddie, has a carpet place in Toronto, bigger than Grand Central Station. Last year, he received an award from the Ontario Floor Covering Institute for being the leading carpet retailer in Ontario. When he got up to receive the plaque, he said, "The reason I can smile at you tonight is because my brother just made a cap for my broken front tooth." Now about Teddy, my brother Teddy married Claire Weinberg, whom he loved dearly. He was a lawyer of much eloquence and humor, both in and out of the courtroom. Their only daughter, Paula, married lawyer Irving Frisch in Toronto. They have two lovely daughters, Dana and Joanne, still at school. When Ted and I got together, we didn't have to say anything. We just looked at each other and we started laughing. Once when he had his appendix out, I went to see him in a hospital and he ordered me out of the room. You will see from the chart that Morris Edelstein, in 1, 2, 3, 4, in column 4, you see Edelstein. His first name was Morris. He was a picture framer. He worked for Jarman. he married Shana Moisel. That's Hersha Pullan's wife's sister. You see, Hersha married a Moisel, and Edelstein married a Moisel. So my mother and Becky Edelstein Gluck are first cousins. Becky was beautiful and a great reader. She was vivacious and loved the theater and show people. When Arthur Tracy, the street singer, appeared on the stage at the Capitol Theater, she entertained him for dinner in her home on Clemo Avenue, next to Aunt Lena's mansion at 7 Clemo, the house that Irving Linto Greenberg bought. Becky encouraged her brother, Ernie Edelstein, to sing, play the piano, and relate humorous stories. He accompanied Rosalind Gluck, Barrett, his niece, on the radio when she sang for Chateau Cheese. Her theme song was, "Try a Little Tenderness." Women do grow weary wearing the same shabby dress, and when she's weary, try a little tenderness. Becky's son, Elliot, graduated from Queen's University in Commerce, got a job with Hudson Bay in Winnipeg. He was tall, handsome, and clever. He was the answer to a maiden's prayer and was intensely popular with the eligible female population of Winnipeg, both Jewish and non-Jewish. Yeah. Sarah, that's Sarah, so Sarah told me. Sarah was a graduate of Manitoba Law School with an LLB degree, while I was struggling away at night on a Pass Arts degree. So the mother of a friend of Sarah's, who was degree conscious, wanted to know why she was marrying me. She said, for physical reasons. And besides, he's the only guy that asked me. Manny Gluck, as you know, is an obstetrician who delivered Trudeau's children. I would say that Becky had not only Ernie as a brother, but also Bob, Jaime. Bob was very funny. So was his son. When I asked him who the doctor he went to, he says, "My personal doctor is Dr. Ballard." Jaime, as you know, was a very able poet. And Harry, I remember he said to me, "I lost my baggage." I says, "What happened?" He says, "A cork flew off." Now, I would like to say that Herzl Edelstein, who was Jaime's son, he lived in Montreal when he was a kid for some time, and he'd mimic the French radio announcers. He'd say, "Mesdames et messieurs, vous entendez maintenant un programme de poste de CKAC, Journal La Presse à Montréal, le papier de surtout, the paper with all the news." And then he'd go, he was a very, Herzl was a very amusing kid. In conclusion, I would like to leave you with 4 things. It is hard to be a Jew, but it's a lot of fun too here in Canada. Second, love those who seek the truth, and beware of them who have found it. Where did I see that? I saw a dentist flashed it on the screen somewhere in the U.S. I thought it was good. 3, there's nothing worth the wear of winning but laughter and the love of friends. That is from Hilaire Belloc. And finally, the best lecturer I ever had in the many years that I've gone to school was a fellow by the name of Harry Worth. He was a dentist, and he was a physician, and he was a radiologist. Perhaps the foremost, he wrote a textbook that's a classic. Perhaps he was the foremost interpreter of x-rays in the world. He was head of radiology at Guy's Hospital in London, England. And he came here because his daughter married a Canadian officer. She was a war bride. Anyway, if you wanted to be a radiologist in the United States, he was on the board. He was invited to be on the board of examiners. I remember at our final lecture, he said, "When is the honeymoon over?" And the answer, "When a quickie is a small drink before lunch." Thanks very much.
I will now take questions from the floor. For the doctor.
I know my brother's here from Montreal. I'd like to know why he voted yes in the last referendum. Where are you, Du? Here he is. And then also here is my nephew, by marriage, Irving Frisch.
Great.
Yeah, thank you. And is there anybody I have overlooked from out of town? Geez, I thought maybe somebody important.
They're all important, Lionel.
Yes, they are. Yeah.
Are there questions to Lionel?
Yeah. Oh, geez, they got it all.
Lionel, I'm going to ask you a question.
Yeah, okay.
A.L. Smith's father.
I beg pardon?
A.L. Smith's father. Married Esther?
A.L. Smith's father.
Was a Smith.
Yeah. What about Julie Smith, yes?
He was Cal Smith's
brother.
How were the Smiths related to the Smiths in Toronto?
They're not related at all.
Not related at all.
The Smiths in Toronto were in the belting business.
Correct.
And they were very prosperous.
Correct.
And I know Coleman used to sell shoes on Spark Street, as he was just down the street from me.
But they're not related whatsoever?
No, they're not related.
Okay. Still questions from the floor?
Well, it's not really a question, Lionel, but Mother always said that I call him Henry Pullan, my grandfather,
yes,
that they had 10 children as well. But one was drowned on Wellington Street across the way. That would make 8, and I never knew what happened to the other 2. But
well, neither do I. I don't know what happened. You see, in the I have it here, the census returns from 1901. I'll show it to you after.
No, I know. You told me.
Yes. No, but I'd be glad to show it to you.
I want to at least include, but Mother always said it was a coincidence that the 3 brothers each had 6 daughters and 4 sons.
Oh, you mean
Yes.
Whose brothers? You mean Hirsch's brothers and sisters?
His family. Yes, his brothers and sisters. That's right.
Yeah, like I see. You mean Elia?
The 3 brothers, Herschel, Elia, and Lotta, that they each had. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But I've told the story a few times. It was a coincidence.
Yes.
That they each had.
Yeah, they were very fruitful. But mind you, their children didn't. Now you take Mutt's children did not have large families, nor did Bessie's children have large families.
And Bessie was a doctor too. She was one
Oh
of
yes,
the first women
that's right.
doctors.
I forgot. There was another brother in column 6 under Mutta. Mutta had.
Just hold it.
Okay. We're going to just turn the. I apologize for overlooking High Mazer's wife, the charming Ruthie Epstein, who came from a family of 9 girls and 1 boy, as opposed to High's family of 9 boys and 1 girl. Ruthie's uncle, David Epstein, left the bulk of his substantial estate to the Ottawa Jewish community.
Because Ruth and I had only 2 children, Earl and Galdalin, I can only accuse them of loafing.